For the most part, people that are getting into farmland preservation are doing it because they want to preserve the farm. So you are getting some capital to reinvest, but nobody's going to get rich off of that. And we always say, like, that's not going to be the thing that makes or breaks your business. But we do see a range of young beginning farmers starting out, gives them some capital, allows them to pay off a mortgage, purchase equipment, redo a building. We also see it used a lot as a tool to transfer to the next generation or for a retirement so that the farm is then transferred to someone else.
So, Amanda, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Coming to you. You, just as an intro, you are currently the Deputy Director for the Department of Agriculture in Berks County, and before that you were involved in various ways, but mostly Agricultural Conservation Easement Coordinator since 2012.
Yep.
And we have worked together on some farmland preservation related things since probably 2012.
Just about, yes.
So when Kara and I were beginning our farmland preservation journey, you were also beginning your farmland preservation journey. And it's always been a pleasure working with you. And
thank you. Likewise.
I feel like the process of going through farmland preservation and conservation easement is always unique. And now that we're on our third farm with that, going through that process, it's different. Every farm is different, and I'm sure that you could attest to the fact that every farmer is very different as well. It's always been a pleasure to work with you, and so thanks for sitting down to talk with me. So just as some background that I thought would be valuable to set the stage is that I just realized this in my research that Pennsylvania is the #1 state in the nation for the amount of preserved farms, and that's around 6,700 farms. So that's a lot of farms, and it's in the top 3 for acres preserved, which is approaching 700,000 acres. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
We think so.
Yeah. So just to continue with that, can you give me a little bit of details on what does farmland preservation, how does that, in a simplified way, how does that program usually play out when you're looking at a farm to preserve or someone approaches you and...
Sure. So I will say too, Berks County is actually #2 then in terms of the state of Pennsylvania, and we are one of the top 5-ish counties in the nation in terms of preserved farmland. We just hit 81,000 acres earlier this year, and we have 855 farms preserved just in Berks County.
Wow.
And so it's a voluntary program. So a farmer, landowner approaches us. They have to meet 5 minimum criteria in order to qualify. We look at acreage, we look at soils, we look at the amount that's being farmed. We look at adherence to our county comprehensive plan, which is kind of like a land use guide, I would say. And then we look at ag security area enrollment, which is done at the township level. And that's kind of the township saying, hey, this is land that we want to see farming continue on. So those are the main criteria that the property has to meet. When it meets all those criteria, we take the farms that we get every year. It's a yearly application cycle, and they are scored, and they're scored based on, there's a bunch of different factors that go into it. We look at soil quality, that's 40% of your overall score. We look at development potential, farmland potential, and cluster potential. Basically, the idea is preserving larger blocks of contiguous farmland since it makes sense, since they're sharing resources, that they're all together.
Yeah.
So applicants are given a score, and then they're ranked based on that score, and we select based on our available funding. We get funding from the county and then also from the state in order to be able to preserve farms. It is a statewide program that's administered on the county level. So each county has some latitude to make some changes and do kind of things that on their own with state approval, but a lot of the guidelines are set by the state. So once we do our scoring and our ranking, then we select and a farmer can choose that if they want to move forward or not move forward. If they choose to move forward, it takes about 1 to 2 years, hopefully, to move through the process and then have the land permanently preserved. It's permanently preserved through a legally recorded easement that states that it has to remain in agricultural use.
Yeah.
And then there's some restrictions that go along with that, obviously, with the agricultural use, and we do an inspection usually the year after the farm's preserved, and then at minimum every other year, just to ensure that those guidelines are being met. That's the short version of a very long process.
Yeah, yeah. And just to even back up a little bit, why are you passionate about this? What brought you to working in this program? You've been doing it for over a decade now.
So I actually grew up in northern New Jersey, which people don't think of as rural, but the area that I grew up was very rural. My father actually had a degree in biology and was a biology teacher for a couple years, ended up working in computers, but he was always very passionate about farming, gardening, being outside, natural world. So that was kind of imprinted on me at an early age. And then he also was an amateur beekeeper, so got involved in kind of that world. Didn't really think of agriculture necessarily as a career path, just because kind of where I grew up, it was either be a farmer or that's it. As far as agriculture, not understanding that there's a whole lot of other things that go into agricultural careers that maybe people aren't aware of, even today. Ended up moving to Pennsylvania in high school, and then went to college. Actually went for criminal justice, and as part of that, my associate's degree, I got an internship and then later a position in Berks County. So I was working actually in the criminal court side. The nice thing about working for the county is that you're kind of then open to this vast network of jobs that are available. I ended up going back to school, getting my bachelor's degree, still in crime and justice, but realizing that that wasn't necessarily for me. Everything I was doing was very punitive. Nobody was happy to see me. It wasn't it wasn't a super fun, happy environment, posting people's bail and, dealing with people that are mad that have to be going to court and things like that. So this job as the ag program coordinator opened up, and I was like, well, this is great. I can use kind of my legal background because it's a legal process. I can use just the fact that I'm passionate about food and local food and people having access to that local food, and put those two together and kind of come up with something that does make me feel good to go to work every day. So kind of everything kind of came together nicely for me.
Yeah, that seems a little more life-giving, probably. But
a lot more so.
Yeah. One of the things that I was researching about with farmland preservation is different ways that people approach farmland preservation as a program that they want to engage with. Traditionally, you would expect it to be a farmer who already owns the land and wants to sell it, sell the preservation rights and do an easement, make a little bit of money. Maybe they're a new farmer that just bought it. And one of the things that I also saw was a realty transfer tax forgiveness program for new and beginning farmers. That sounds like a really cool option that I wasn't aware of. But maybe you could just speak a little bit to what do you see the spectrum of why people are coming to farmland preservation program, and what kind of questions they're coming and perspective they're coming at it with?
Sure. So again, it's voluntary. So the applicants that we get are people that are interested in the program, and there is, they are paid. It is a purchased easement, but we do an appraisal for easement value, which is basically the difference between its value for development and its value as a farm. Which, believe it or not, in Berks County, that value isn't super high. That difference in value, I should say. So for the most part, people that are getting into farmland preservation are doing it because they want to preserve the farm. So you are getting some capital to reinvest, but nobody's going to get rich off of that. And we always say, like, that's not going to be the thing that makes or breaks your business. But we do see a range of young beginning farmers starting out, gives them some capital, allows them to pay off a mortgage, purchase equipment, redo a building. We also see it used a lot as a tool to transfer to the next generation or for a retirement so that the farm is then transferred to someone else. That happens a lot. We actually usually have a list of applicants, and even if they're selected, they may not be ready to move forward because they're not quite at that retirement age yet, or they're just not ready to do that, to transition. But it is a useful tool to kind of transition the farm and be able to retire.
So they would be selling it in the process of doing preservation?
Yes, or shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's shortly thereafter. Either transfer it to a son, a grandson, I should make that gender neutral, children, grandchildren, or selling it to someone else. Yes, so they do that a lot of times either during the process, which is a little more paperwork.
Yeah.
So they get like a little bit to boost their retirement fund, and then they're still able to turn around and sell the property. And overall, it doesn't really affect the farm's resale value, especially in southeastern Pennsylvania, where there are a lot of people that want farms to farm them. They don't necessarily, there are people that want farms to develop them, but there are just as many people that want farms to farm them.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. If you see, obviously you're not an appraiser, but you do see a lot of appraisals for these properties, and because every time you are doing an appraisal to try and attribute the value of the preservation or the easement to the transaction, and that is intended to be equivalent to the quote-unquote loss in value, because you're giving up an asset, so to say, that like you would be selling your gas rights or something like that. It's just another piece of a real estate transaction or a piece of real estate that you are kind of carving out and selling.
Right.
Do you see that really is a true direct corollary with the amount of dollars that the program's compensating and the actual real loss in value in the property? Or
we overall don't really see an overall real loss in value. Again, like I said, there's a lot of people that want farms to farm them. We do have a very large plain Amish and Mennonite population here in Berks County, and they require land, and they require land in close proximity to their church. So there are a lot of people that want to purchase farmland for farmland. So it doesn't overall necessarily affect the value at the end of the day. Yes, theoretically there's a loss in value, but people are still able to get. And again, it all depends on the area of the county and the soils and things like that. But 15,000 an acre is not unheard of, even if it's a preserved farm.
Yeah, that's cheap, and compared to like Lancaster County or some of the more like Mennonite Amish central areas. And I haven't thought about that as much either. Is how the plain community is, generally the way what we call Mennonite and Amish, conservative Mennonite and Amish communities, they seem to be okay with farmland preservation, because they traditionally are they don't want to be involved in government and things like that, but they seem to be friendly to the program.
Yes. So initially, the program started in 1989 with the first farm preserved in 1990. So initially, you're correct. They were kind of against being involved. We did have some purchase farms that were already preserved, but again, they were kind of unwilling to get involved in the process and take the money themselves. But I think it depends on the church and the bishop and what the feeling is there, because that kind of has changed, and we do have a lot of members of the plain community that participate in the program from the beginning, actively preserve their farms. And some of that, I think, is based on the fact that they're looking to be good stewards of the land just as much as anyone else is, and that allows them some capital to be able to do that. So that is fascinating that has evolved, and that's probably for the better.
But that is a good reminder too. The Mennonite and Amish community sometimes have very hyper localized kind of approaches to different things based on each different congregation and things like that. So I guess that's something you just have to navigate on a case-by-case basis. So that kind of brings us to one of my other questions, which was just general pros and cons. I mean, obviously, one of the pros that we've already discussed is the monetary compensation. And another pro is that you're getting money and not losing value, theoretically, in the land. But a lot of folks who are either in the farming community or not in the farming community would say that it's to give up a certain amount of equity or a certain asset associated with your land is not a good thing to do, especially if it's a lower dollar value. Berks County is kind of on the lower end of the price per acre compared to other regional counties like Lehigh or Bucks or, I don't know, Lancaster, I would assume. So giving up value, but also having the government involved in your business or in your land.
Sure. So I will say one of the reasons, again, that Berks is a little bit lower than maybe especially Lehigh or Montgomery is the development pressure it's high, but not as high. And again, that difference in value isn't the same. So our easement value doesn't appraise. Lehigh will pay up to $6,000 an acre. Montgomery, I believe, is 10. We don't get those appraisal values to even begin to pay that because we're not allowed to pay above what it appraises at. Our average is about $3,000, maybe $3,500. So our $2,800 per acre cap isn't that far off from what the values are, even though it looks that way.
Yeah.
So yes, again, your pros are you're getting that funding. You are also, you're leaving a legacy. Again, like I said, nobody's really doing this to get rich, especially if you're looking to retire or transfer on to the next generation. This is a way to ensure that your land remains in farmland and is not going to be developed and in houses. And I think that's very important to people as they move forward. Cons, obviously, yes, you do have government involvement. However, the easement language, if you're looking at farming the land, the easement language isn't necessarily uber restrictive. I mean, you are required to have a conservation plan, which addresses all your soil and water resources and make sure that there are no resource concerns. And if there are resource concerns, that those are addressed. That's something that you're technically required to have anyway.
Yeah.
It's just, I always liken it to speeding. If you're speeding and no one's looking, you're going to get away with it. So you're getting away with not having a conservation plan. It's just, you have another level of someone looking at you.
Yeah.
So we're making sure that you're not speeding, quote unquote. So making sure that you have a conservation plan. But having a conservation plan just kind of also ensures that you're stewarding the land and making it as productive as possible moving forward.
Yeah, and the Department of Ag does those for free. The
Yes,
conservation plans.
Yes,
So it's
the
kind of
U.S.
like,
Department of Ag. Yep.
Yeah, you
Yes.
basically have a comprehensive plan of your land management, and you don't have to really pay for it. So
Exactly.
it helps, and those are all custom based on each farm's goals and intentions, and so it is kind of a nice guide to have.
Right.
And
Right.
that you would have to probably pay a lot of money to some kind of consulting firm otherwise. And there are consulting firms that charge a lot of money for that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yes. But yes, the USDA does provide those. They provide the technical assistance. They help, direct you towards grants and other funding that are available. And that's something that's available whether or not you're a preserve farm or not. It's just if you're a preserve farm, you do kind of get bumped up that priority list because you're participating with the program. I mean, there's always a con when you're giving away a right. There's always kind of a trade-off, but it really depends on what the intent with the land is. If the intent is to farm it and to continue farming it, that restriction doesn't feel so restrictive. If you're trying to buy it and then put in $1 million mansion and things like that takes up a lot of land, then it might feel more restrictive. So I think some of that's personal, as far as what the cons are. We do, as a department, understand that agriculture is changing. It doesn't necessarily look the same as it did 35 years ago when the program started. It's not so easy to have multiple generations on a farm supported by that farm income from a 50, 60 cow dairy or whatever. So there are some allowances for what are called rural enterprises. Those are basically non-farming businesses. There are some allowances for that. And we really try to kind of be cognizant of the fact that we're all kind of in this together. We're working on this together. If somebody comes to us with a proposal of some type of business that they want to do, we'll work with them to see where, if it fits, and if so, where it'll fit. It becomes more of an issue when people just kind of go off and do things and don't get the approval that they're required to get beforehand. And then we're trying to figure out how to make this square peg fit into a round hole after the fact. Like if we can work on it collaboratively together through the process, that makes it better. Yeah, I will say.
Good. Yeah, that's interesting. And to that, there's also exclusionary zones that you can set up to be able to give a little more flexibility within the preservation area with farm buildings or the house or things like that. So that's always been something that there's creative flexibility there, but you kind of have to do it from day one, and it's much harder to back out of that.
Right.
Does that ever happen? One thing that I've always wondered is, do you get approached by companies or organizations or individuals that want to buy back the easement, or?
All the time, people approach that want to buy back the easement, but that's not an option. It's not an option in our guidelines, state guidelines, and we have been told on numerous occasions that the state has no interest in that. In allowing that to happen or putting in provisions for that. Even, land swapping, things like that, those just aren't permitted the way that the guidelines are written. And again, as far as I'm aware, the state has no interest in allowing for those kinds of things. I know there have been cases in Maryland. Maryland actually has a lot of preserved farmland, believe it or not, where people have tried to make an argument and say that it's no longer agriculturally viable. But that's, even if it's surrounded by development, it's still agriculturally viable. I was at a conference recently and they were talking about urban agriculture, so agriculture in urban spaces. But there's actually a really interesting market and interesting thought process about what they called peri-urban agriculture. So agriculture kind of sort of on the outskirts of urban areas, because your marketplace is right there, but you're still able to have maybe a bigger piece of farmland versus in an urban space you have smaller land and smaller resources. So I don't know that argument can ever be made, because fruit, you're well aware of this, fruit and vegetable market on land surrounded by houses, there's a market there. So you can't say that land isn't agriculturally viable.
The proximity to the consumer has positive implications on whether that's viable. It would have to be a parking lot, basically, for it not to be, agriculturally viable or something.
Which they're not allowed to make it a parking lot anyway, based on the easement. So.
And if it was already structurally bad land, then you might not have preserved it in the first place.
Absolutely, right.
Because you prioritize prime agricultural land for the preservation.
Right. Yep, we look at soils are the biggest determining factor. They're one of the 5 criteria even for eligibility, but that's 40% of the overall score that we look at is your soil quality.
And I think you mentioned something about land swapping.
Yes.
Is that like the idea where you want to build there's preserved farm and you want to build something like a shopping center on it, and so then you're like, well, we'll buy this and preserve this over here if you let us unpreserve this and develop it?
That's, yes. Or, just like that's the extreme example. But but again, that's not ever been permitted, and it does not happen. No.
Because I have heard rumors of that happening.
So there is something called I can't remember the name of it now, but where you're able to transfer TDRs, transfer of development rights. So a developer is able to go and say, okay, in my zoning on this piece of property over here, I'm only allowed to build, 10 single family units, but I want to put in a high rise condo system. So I'm going to take these development rights and I'm going to purchase them from this property over here to preserve it, and then I'm transferring them to this property over here so I can increase what's allowed under zoning from those extra development rights, if that makes sense.
But that's not farmland preservation.
That's only, then this piece gets preserved, this piece over here, but it's prior to, it's not after the fact. So it's sort of a swap, but again, it's as part of the process. We don't see that a lot in Berks. Other counties, I believe York County does some TDRs where they are, at the township level.
Yeah. TDR.
Yeah.
I'll have to learn more about that. Not that I want to do that, but I just...
I do believe that Washington, I believe it was Washington, it was either Washington or Hereford, investigated it probably 25 years ago, but I don't think it ever panned out for the specific project that they wanted to do.
Yeah, I just feel like I've heard rumor of those kind of things and it's always, this like chain of like down Whisper Lane, and I've never understood the details of what is actually happening or how it happens. So that's interesting to like get it explained.
Right.
And so it's,
Yeah. So it always sounds worse. And then when you actually go and pick apart the details, it's really actually a helpful tool. And it can be helpful. Just depends on, it has to be the right situation.
Yeah, and sometimes just the zoning, as long as you can do those things within the context of what zoning allows or what the township allows and things, then, so be it. Do you, in your experience, do you see any groups or like organizations approaching you who are coming at it from more of like a organizational enterprise investing standpoint, where they're investing in farmland and they see that as a valuable investment, and then farmland preservation, selling agricultural easement is one piece of them capitalizing on that investment?
I would
we seeing that in Pennsylvania?
I haven't, and I don't know. So we do get together with our kind of county counterparts throughout the state. We get together with them. I haven't really heard of that happening. I mean, we are, for the most part, even if the farm is a corporation, it's usually a family corporation that we're dealing with. So really, I have not seen anybody using farmland preservation as a land investment tool. It doesn't mean it's not a viable one. I just think that we just haven't really seen that yet. There's not a lot of, and people are always against like corporate agriculture and corporate farming, but we just don't really see a lot of that in Berks. We have a lot of small family farms, or even if it's a family operation and it's a larger operation, it's still, at its core, it's still kind of family-based.
Yeah, and also land values are kind of maybe on the higher range just because of our proximity to urban areas and just a little bit higher demand than maybe, say, out in the Midwest or something like that. I subscribe to Lancaster Farming. I just got that subscription this year. I've been meaning to do it for a long time. It's a great newspaper, and it's nice to just sit and read an actual newspaper. I've never been a newspaper kind of guy, but it's fun to just sit and drink some coffee on the weekend and read what's going on in Pennsylvania and other states. And almost every single issue right now, except for maybe this last week, there's always something having to do with data centers. And sometimes positive, sometimes negative. There's opinion sections where people are, saying it's good, saying it's bad, or just generally like anti-AI type stuff. What kind of pressure are you seeing, or what kind of conversations are you involved in regarding data centers? Because I know Governor Shapiro is trying to encourage the opportunity for Pennsylvania to be able to participate in the data center and the AI industry. And so obviously there's an element of trying to strike a balance. So what have you been seeing
Absolutely.
in that
so
regard?
I know there's a lot of concern over data centers. It's been coming up more and more at different conferences and different things that I've been at. especially over the last few months. I will say, so we, in the Department of Ag, we sit under Community and Economic Development in the county with one of our sister agencies is our County Planning Commission. And one of the things that they have done is they've kind of produced a white paper on how to help municipalities draft ordinances around data centers. So one of the things with zoning is that you have to allow for all land uses. So if your municipality zoning doesn't have something in it addressing data centers, then there's a lot less restrictions about where they can go. So it's important for people at the municipal level to look at where is a good place for a data center. Because I'm not saying that good or bad, but there are places that are much better suited to data centers than others. So that's really important at the municipal level to direct them where they should go, where there's infrastructure. Specifically utilities. That's the big one. Because I know people get upset about putting them in open farmland, but that isn't necessarily the best place for data centers because where are they getting the utilities from? And really, in this area, there already is kind of a strain on our utilities, and there's not a lot of, let's say, shovel-ready data center sites. So that's kind of something to consider. The other thing that's, I call data centers kind of the new warehouses. I know that nobody wants them in their backyard, but again, it's more about kind of planning and to me getting involved at the local level to help determine, what things are best suited to go where. Because we do have to allow for everything. And if not everybody, but a lot of people want to be able to use technology and advance, and so we have to think about where these things could go and maybe should go, and then let's protect our farmland over here. Let's put these things in places where there maybe already is, there is infrastructure where you can kind of revitalize an area that maybe there was industry and isn't industry now. So I think there is a time and a place for data centers. But then also those utility lines, that's another concern for farmland. So data center does not fit on a preserve farm. Can't put a data center on a preserve farm. I'll say that right now. However, you are allowed to put rights of way for public utilities through a preserve farm. So electric lines, even things like pipelines, those kinds of things, those are permitted. So I know that's kind of the issue that's come up in other counties is maybe the data center isn't going on the farmland, but the utility line goes through the farmland. But it's just a matter of kind of planning so that we can mitigate some of those concerns.
There's a very wide variety of opinions on whether they should even be around or not. But it's the thing that strikes me is that we do have this area, the Lehigh Valley region, is a very it's a logistically significant area for the tri-state New York, Philly, DC, Baltimore region, and so we do have a lot of history here with warehouses being built all through the whole Route 78 corridor, and so it strikes me as not that different than the warehouses, all the Amazon U-line warehouses that have been being erected. No one really likes that, and unfortunately, I feel like most of them have gone on farmland.
Yes, and again, that's kind of an issue. Sort of a similar issue where if you don't plan for it to go somewhere, it can go anywhere. And the easiest place to put it is your flat farmland, where you're not having to redevelop an area. However, is that the best place? So I encourage...
What is the best place?
I mean, again, I would say, we have places where that could be redeveloped in some of our more urban areas. Redevelopment is really important, and people don't always think of that.
It's a very post-industrial region of the country as well. We had the iron steel mills, that industry as well, and there's a lot of dilapidated, kind of industrial areas as well that could be more appropriate.
Absolutely. They're already where public utilities exist. So, even certain things that need rail car, they're already near railways. So those places exist. And again, it's not really for me to say whether things are right or wrong, but we just need to do a good job of making sure we put them where they should best be suited to go.
And what I think you were saying too is that basically this is kind of since it is a new thing, municipalities and townships don't actually have zoning ordinances that apply.
Right.
So they have an incentive to figure this out as quick as they can, because if they don't, then the door is kind of already open a little bit.
Right.
And it creates more opportunity for a developer to put it anywhere they want. I'm probably being a little oversimplifying, but if they don't have something specifically written that pertains to that construction application, whatever it's called, then they might be able to put it anywhere.
Right. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, it's up to the kind of and this is something that I am passionate about, but your local government is so important. And people always want to vote in a presidential year or even look at your government at a federal level, but your local government is where things actually really happen. So your municipal government, your county government, that's where things actually happen. And that's really what I think people should pay attention to, that maybe they don't. And I know it involves a little bit more research because that stuff's not always in your face as much as the stuff at the federal level, but that's where the real change and the real things happen.
Yeah, your vote has a higher degree of influence in that, there might be only however many thousand people voting on a topic or an individual, elected official. So you just statistically speaking have a lot more say as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good reminder for all of us. I need to be better at that.
Me too. So it's a good reminder for me too.
Yeah. So what about the future? What does the future look like for farmland preservation in PA? I know that you guys just kind of bumped up the price that you're paying per acre for easements. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit. Are you running out of land to preserve in Berks County? Or, are prices going to go up that you offer per acre?
So we get a set amount of funding from the county and the state, and we try to maximize that funding to preserve as much farmland as we can with that, with keeping in mind and trying to keep in touch with, again, what those per acre easement values are, so that we're not too far off base. Our current cap is $2,800 per acre. I think it's been that for the past 3 years. Our board does look at setting that cap every year. They look at, data from the previous year's appraisals. They look at other county data. So whether they'll raise it, so that was set for 2026. Whether they'll raise it in 2027, I don't know. We do always, as long as I've been involved and even before that, we have more applicants to the program than we're able to select. So I think as long as that continues, then I don't know that they'll raise it too significantly. And again, they can't raise it above what is actually, the farm actually appraises at anyway. Our board did do some outreach in the past couple years and is continuing to do some outreach to farms in what we affectionately call the donut holes. So maybe surrounded by preserved farmland and that particular piece isn't preserved if it qualifies. Just because, again, one of the things we focus on is clusters of preserved farmland. Helps, if your neighbors are all farmers, your neighbor complaints are reduced. And then you just kind of have an understanding of what's going on and also resources.
Is that why, what are the reasons for trying to form clusters of preserved farms?
That's exactly right. So, again, and there's nothing wrong with a farm preserve surrounded by houses in theory, but then you have all those houses that might make it difficult for the ag operator. Having a cluster helps helps preserve the industry kind of as a whole, because it's a lot easier for an equipment repair person or a seed dealer to locate here and all their clients are all around them versus here. It just makes the overall ag industry more viable if it's kind of clustered together.
Yeah, and just neighbors helping neighbors.
Absolutely.
Working together in that way. And that's, so you're thinking about it as more of a long-term kind of cohesive community of businesses and individuals, and you're trying to engineer that in a resilient way, kind of. So
it's a perpetual easement, so we try to be as forward-thinking as we can. Can't always, but try to think of those things.
Yeah, and to that point, I did have a note here that PA, the agricultural industry in PA is $132 billion annually and supports nearly 600,000 jobs.
So we just did a study last year, the year before, for Berks County, and in Berks County, it's a $1 billion industry just in Berks County, and it supports about 4,500 jobs. However, those are supported jobs. That doesn't take into account the farmer that's farming his own land, especially if he has maybe another job that he goes to, or the farmer's family that helps support that farm. So that 4,500 is additionally on top of, those numbers are on top of that 4,500. But yes, so $1 billion just in Berks County alone. Like we talked about, Berks County is uniquely positioned to be around a $269 billion regional food market. So we have a lot of opportunity here in the county for agriculture. We actually, our department has a local food map, which has over 260 places. Yep, 260 places in the county where you can buy local products. So we're very fortunate that we have all this agriculture here, and we have the ability to continue to support it.
Yeah, that's really, it's neat. It's a cool agricultural economy, and
having preserved farmland gives us a secure local food source, which is important to me. Again, there's nothing like a tomato that comes from a farm field that's grown out in the sun versus one that you buy in the grocery store. But it's also, in a way, it's national security, and that's a thing that I think people don't necessarily think about, because we saw this during COVID and shutdowns and things where our transportation was an issue. We have all that farmland right here. Berks County is home to some of the most productive non-irrigated soils in the entire country. So we'll kind of always have the ability to grow food here, and being able to preserve that is important. We want to make sure that we continue to have that.
Yeah, I think that we, as individuals, we have our kind of blinders up and we think about our own little lives, and I'm going to go to the farmer's market and support the farmer and things, but you and the government are thinking about this on a totally different scale. Like you're thinking about do you know how many residents are in Berks County? There's a lot. There's a lot of people. Reading is a large city, and that's a whole different scale of thinking about like an economy and a community we don't typically think about that, and sometimes it is good to kind of zoom out and think about the big picture like that and understand how these different initiatives are contributing to that regional self-reliance, and that being obviously you can't grow a lot of crops in downtown Reading, Pennsylvania, but there's an enormous amount of people there that need to be fed, and same goes for even larger cities like Philadelphia and New York, which are not far.
Right.
But that's it's not something we usually think about all that scale. I'm just looking at the picture here of Berks County and thinking about it as like an organism and that is sustaining itself.
Right. And we're in a region. I mean, we're lucky that we're in a region where there's a lot of agriculture. There's a lot in Lancaster, there is in Lehigh and Lebanon, and we're in a region that kind of supports that whole industry.
Yeah, and you mentioned the kind of the phase of COVID and that changing a lot of people's perspective. Did you see, or have you seen things change since that? Like some of the people that I talked to have had these kind of come to Jesus moments, I guess, where they're like, I need to be able to support my family. I need to be able to, survive. And when everything else is crumbling around globally or just nationally or locally, have you seen some of the kinds of people that you're talking to with farmland preservation? Is that changing?
I would say I think we have seen an increase in people shopping locally and caring about local food. And I don't know if that's COVID or just the world that we live in now. But again, we didn't have and again, we didn't have a map or anything, but I don't think we had 260 places in the county to buy local food prior to COVID, and now we do.
Yeah.
So let's look at how to continue supporting and sustaining all those businesses, because that's really important.
Yeah, it is. Great. Well, thanks for sitting down and talking.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.